Here is from Natasha. You see, what it is Natasha said, Natasha backs state police, demands safeguards against abuse. Hear her speak.
Him were constant. Houses were burned, people were killed. There was no time that I would get on the field to campaign that we would not go home with at least 18 to 20 persons shot. And I did pay the Commissioner of Police, Commissioner Busari, a visit. And often, most times he would tell me that his hands were tied. He would tell me to please reach the national police, that is the IG of police at the force headquarters, to instruct him, because at the state level, his hands were tied. And it got to a point when I remember a particular moment, the thugs, the political thugs, were walking openly, equipped with guns, and they were in company of the police. So I drew his attention to that with pictures, and I say, here you have the thugs surrounded by your policemen. Wouldn't you call them to order? Do you know what he told me? He said, Madam, why don't you recruit your own thugs too, to balance power?
So now this is Natasha Odwaya, still showing her own concern. Her own concern is police, this federal police, working with thugs. If I intimidating people that are supposed to be protected, and that is the same thing I've been saying. They are talking about this issue of state police over and over without talking about reform. And even when you talk about reform, what kind of reform? Nigerian law enforcement agencies are reactive law enforcement agents. And in every other developed world, police is not supposed to be reactive. They're supposed to be proactive. And our government do not understand even what it takes to reform police to the standard for where through which they will be proactive. So when you see this concern from Natasha Odwaya, police working with thugs, how do they balance through those two equations? Because you see, like, employing your own personal security is common all over the world. It's not a crime. But how do you balance in a situation whereby police do their work and without working alongside with thugs in order to intimidate people they are supposed to be protecting? When an individual employs his own personal security and police is there, police work is to make sure that those personal security does not cross their own boundary. Look at her. You can see that she said that even the commissioner of police telling her to employ her own thugs if she don't like the way they are operating. Is it the same police? Imagine a police that are operating this way and you want to add more police that operate that way at the state level. That is our own concern. So in order, when we talk about this police, they should be well defined. When you hear people speak this, the idea of a police, a restructuring of police, ask the person, what do you mean by a restructuring of police? What is your own idea? Let me hear you speak. Let's hear Oshomole speak on her own side of what he thinks about state police.
What is the tool of enforcing security? If a state has to have responsibility for primary health care, can it do so without the Ministry of Health? So I cannot be a state security officer. I have no control. I can't give orders to the police. I can't discipline my instrument of control. I cannot promote. I cannot recruit. So it's like calling me a husband, but I have no wife. So I think that over the ages, people have...
So for Oshomole, when you notice all of this discussion, they are not discussing in details what this state police, their responsibility, and what are things that are not their responsibility. We can't hear them. They are just giving excuses. Now, this is what it said. Crediting governors as CSOs of state without control is like calling a man husband who has no wife. That is Oshomole. There is an inherent contradiction in the provision of the Constitution. The state governor is designed as the chief security officer. But what tools does he have to enforce security? How can a state chief security officer have no authority to give order to the police? If any governor misuses state police, Nigerians have the right to vote that individual out of office. Now, this is Oshomole saying this. I know there is more. You see, because when they talk about this is about autonomy, because he is trying to advocate for autonomy, that's law enforcement autonomy, which is a good thing. That is the way it is all over the world. This is Adams Oshomole, federal lawmaker representing Edo's senatorial district. Now, when you notice the Adam Oshomole, his idea, his own opinion is quite good. But remember, in those countries that have complete law enforcement autonomy, as a so what authority over their police, those country states are states that have a what? What do I? How do I put it? Those are states. Okay, country like United States of America, they have state autonomy. That means state is independent from the federal government. They operate on their own. They have their own judiciary. In the United States of America, every state have their own Supreme Court. They have their own, in fact, everything. They have their own Senate. They have their own National Assembly. They have their own National Assembly. Let me put it that way. And they have their own Supreme Court. They have everything that's at the federal level. So they operate. Every state in the U.S. operate like a nation. Now in Nigeria, we are not that way. We are operating a federation. Everything is cycled, a centralized government. That's what Nigeria is operating. So there's no way you expect governors to have sole responsibility of law enforcement, because that is what he's trying to advocate. But those are not the things that we are supposed to be discussing in this kind of atmosphere where we are battering with what this issue of insecurity. They're supposed to be discussing the items, the content of law enforcement agents, the items of the security, or they are supposed to be discussing about the item, the provisions. What does it entail? When you discuss about the state police, what is the content? What should be their work? And what will be made, or as in what will now be made of the federal police? Because this, they just a discussion. When did they already finish all this conversation about this state police, what they should be doing, and what federal police should be doing? That is when they will start talking about all this issue of governors, what thing will be their part and what thing will be the part of the federal government and the National Assembly. So let's hear more from Oshomole.
First, my view is that there is inherent contradiction if you look at the provisions of the Constitution. The state governor is the chief security officer. What is the tool of enforcing security? If a state has to have responsibility for primary health care, can it do so without the Ministry of Health? So I cannot be a state security officer. I have no control. I can't give orders to the police. I can't discipline my instrument of control. I cannot promote. I cannot recruit. So it's like calling me a husband, but I have no wife. So I think.
So it's to its own idea, all that is being called a complete state autonomy in terms of law enforcement.
Isn't working.
But that is not how it should be. There's no way in this country called Nigeria that states will have sole responsibility of a law enforcement, especially in terms of police. What is supposed to be done in Nigeria is whereby the situation whereby they will share the responsibility, just like in every other nations. They will break it down that this is an internal law enforcement agency. Police will have responsibility. Then the federal police have to almost turn like FBI. That is what Nigerian law enforcement is supposed to be. Then when you turn out that way, remember, funding of the law enforcement agencies is another thing. Because that is where all of this is going. When you want to make the law enforcement agency at state level to be the sole responsibility of the state, funding becomes an issue. Then the states will start pursuing forward to be what? Autonomous. All of this is linked from one level to the other. All of that is why you see in all these videos I've been doing relating to this issue of security, I keep on calling them, look, all these people are mistake that they do. This is what they call misplaced superiority. This is what they're supposed to do, is setting up the command and control center that I keep on calling well equipped, and it's less expensive than state police. Security of this country, Nigeria have been highly populated, so security has gone beyond police alone. Then if you want to talk about this state police, it comes with a lot. State need to be independent for them to be able to do everything, for them to be able to generate enough resources to care for the law enforcement, to care for health, education, and every other parts, sectors. Because I know what Adams Oshiomhole is supposed to call. Yes, in terms of health, he said that yes, state, they are the one taking the sole responsibility of primary health care. Imagine adding the responsibility, because you notice governors, even as much as they want the state governors to control state police, governors don't want to take the sole responsibility of the funding. Just the same way they are taking the sole responsibility of funding under health. That is to tell you the weight that comes with it. And at the federal level, you won't see a president won't be funding state police and carry the whole law, as in the whole power to recruit everything and hand over to the governor. That is where all this is running up and down.